If you take a moment and look at the world around you, almost everything you see, from the phone in your hand to the food you eat, the clothes you wear, and even the buildings you walk through, exists within a system controlled by something that does not physically exist in the way we imagine it does. Something that has no inherent value on its own, yet somehow determines the value of everything else. And that thing is money, one of the most powerful inventions in human history, and also one of the strangest, because despite its influence over nearly every aspect of life, money is not real in the way most people think it is. In the beginning, long before coins, paper bills, or digital transactions, humans lived in small communities where survival depended on direct exchange, a system known as barter, where goods and services were traded directly between people without any intermediate form of value, meaning that if you had something someone else needed, you could exchange it for something you needed in return, creating a simple and direct way of sustaining life. A farmer might trade grain for tools, a hunter might exchange meat for clothing, and a builder might offer shelter in return for food. And while this system worked in small groups where everyone knew each other, it began to break down as societies grew larger and more complex. The problem with barter was not its simplicity, but its limitations, because it required what economists call a double coincidence of wants, meaning that both parties in a trade had to want exactly what the other was offering at the same time. And if that condition was not met, the trade could not happen, creating inefficiencies that slowed down economic activity and made large-scale trade nearly impossible. Imagine trying to buy bread when the baker does not need what you have, or attempting to trade livestock for something as small as a piece of fabric, and you begin to understand why a new system was needed, one that could represent value in a more flexible and universal way. That solution came in the form of commodity money, where certain goods that were widely accepted and considered valuable became mediums of exchange, including items like salt, livestock, shells, and even metals, all of which had intrinsic value and could be used to facilitate trade without requiring a direct exchange of goods. Among these, metals such as gold and silver eventually became dominant because they were durable, divisible, portable, and rare enough to maintain value, making them ideal for representing wealth in a growing economy. As civilizations advanced, the use of standardized coins emerged, with governments and rulers stamping metal pieces with official markings to guarantee their weight and purity, creating trust in the system and allowing people to trade more efficiently across regions and cultures. These coins were not just pieces of metal, but symbols of authority and control, representing the power of the state and its ability to regulate economic activity. And for the first time, money became not just a tool for trade, but a mechanism of governance. However, even metal coins had limitations, particularly in large transactions where carrying heavy amounts of gold or silver became impractical, leading to the development of paper money, which at first was simply a representation of stored value, a promise that could be exchanged for actual metal held in reserve. But over time, this system evolved into something far more abstract, as governments began to issue currency that was not backed by physical commodities, but by trust alone. This transformation marked one of the most significant shifts in the history of money, because it changed money from something tangible into something conceptual, something that only has value because people collectively agree that it does. A shared belief that allows paper, numbers, and digital signals to function as a universal system of exchange. Today, most money exists not as physical cash, but as digital entries in banking systems, moving instantly across the world in the form of electronic transactions that have no physical presence at all, yet can influence economies, markets, and entire nations. What makes this even more fascinating is that money, despite its immense power, is ultimately built on trust. Because without trust, the system collapses. And this has happened throughout history, in moments where currencies lost their value due to inflation, political instability, or loss of confidence, proving that money is not a fixed entity, but a fragile construct dependent on belief, stability, and collective agreement. Beyond its economic function, money has also shaped human behavior in profound ways, influencing decisions, relationships, and even identity, because it is not just a tool for survival, but a measure of success, a symbol of status, and in many cases, a source of motivation or pressure. People pursue it, compete for it, and organize entire systems around it, often forgetting that, at its core, money is simply a tool, not the ultimate goal. And perhaps that is where the story becomes most strange, because something that began as a practical solution to the limitations of barter has evolved into a system that defines entire societies, governs global interactions, and influences nearly every decision we make, despite having no intrinsic value beyond the meaning we assign to it. In modern times, the concept of money continues to evolve, with the rise of digital currencies and decentralized systems challenging traditional financial structures and raising new questions about what money is and what it could become in the future, suggesting that the story of money is far from finished and that the system we rely on today may one day be replaced or transformed into something entirely different. And when you step back and think about it, the most surprising part of all is that money, in its current form, is nothing more than a shared illusion, a system that works because everyone agrees that it does, a collective belief that turns paper into power, numbers into influence, and ideas into reality. And that is the strange origin of money, a concept that began as a simple solution to trade, evolved into a symbol of power and control, and continues to shape the world in ways that are both visible and invisible, reminding us that sometimes the most powerful forces in human history are not physical at all, but exist only because we believe in them. And yet, the more you think about money, the stranger it becomes. Because despite all the systems, structures, and institutions built around it, the entire concept still rests on something incredibly fragile, which is belief. A shared understanding between billions of people that this thing we call money has value, even though in reality it is nothing more than a symbol, a representation, a promise that only works as long as everyone continues to accept it. The moment that belief weakens, the system begins to shake, and history has shown this again and again through moments of economic collapse, hyperinflation, and financial crises, where currencies that once held immense power suddenly became worthless, leaving people with stacks of paper that could no longer buy even the most basic necessities, revealing just how delicate the entire structure truly is. What makes this even more fascinating is how deeply money is woven into human psychology, because it does not simply function as a tool for exchange, but as a measure of worth, a signal of success, and in many cases, a source of identity, shaping how people see themselves and how they are seen by others, influencing decisions that go far beyond survival and extending into ambition, competition, and even self-worth. People chase money not only because they need it, but because it represents something larger: security, freedom, power, recognition, and the ability to control their own lives. Yet, in that pursuit, it often becomes something more than a tool, turning into a goal that defines behavior, priorities, and sometimes even values. And yet, despite all of this, there is a quiet paradox at the center of money. Because while it appears to give control, it also creates dependence, tying individuals and entire societies to systems that require constant participation, constant production, and constant exchange, creating a cycle that never truly stops. People work to earn money, spend money to survive, and then return to work again, repeating the process endlessly. often without questioning the structure itself, because it has become so normalized that it feels natural, even though it is entirely constructed. As the world continues to evolve, money itself is undergoing another transformation, moving further away from the physical and deeper into the digital, where transactions happen instantly across continents, where wealth can exist purely as numbers on a screen, and where new forms of currency, such as cryptocurrencies, are challenging traditional systems by removing centralized control and introducing new ways of thinking about value, ownership, and trust. These changes raise important questions about the future, not just of money, but of the systems that depend on it. Because if money is based on belief, then any shift in what people believe can reshape the entire structure. At the same time, technology is accelerating this shift, making money faster, more accessible, and more abstract than ever before, reducing the physical presence of currency while increasing its influence, creating a world where financial systems operate at speeds and scales that are difficult to fully comprehend, and where decisions made in one part of the world can ripple across global markets in seconds. In this environment, understanding money becomes more important than ever, not just as a concept, but as a force that shapes opportunities, limitations, and outcomes on both individual and collective levels. But perhaps the most important realization comes when you step back and see money for what it truly is. Not as an ultimate goal, but as a tool, a system designed to facilitate exchange, not to define existence. Because when money is seen only as a means rather than an end, it changes the way people interact with it, shifting the focus from accumulation to purpose, from chasing value to creating it, and from competition to contribution. This perspective does not remove the importance of money, but it places it in context, allowing it to serve rather than control. And in many ways, that brings the story full circle, back to its origins, when money was simply a solution to a problem, a way to make trade easier, faster, and more efficient, before it grew into something far more complex and influential, shaping entire civilizations and redefining how humans interact with one another. The journey from barter to digital currency is not just a story of economic evolution, but a reflection of human creativity, adaptability, and the constant search for better systems. And yet, despite all its complexity, money remains one of the simplest ideas at its core. A shared agreement, a collective belief that allows people to exchange value across time and space, connecting individuals, communities, and nations in ways that would otherwise be impossible. It is both powerful and fragile, essential and abstract, real in its impact, yet intangible in its form. So the next time you use money, whether it is a coin, a bill, or a number on a screen, it is worth remembering that you are participating in one of the most extraordinary systems ever created. A system that exists not because it is physically real, but because billions of people have agreed that it is. A system that has shaped history, built empires, and continues to influence the future in ways that are still unfolding. And that is the strange origin of money, a concept born from necessity, transformed by innovation, sustained by belief, and evolving with every generation, reminding us that sometimes the most powerful forces in the world are not things we can hold in our hands, but ideas we carry in our minds.